In 2024, more than 80,000 Americans died from drug overdoses, according to the CDC, with fentanyl driving the majority of those tragedies. For parents, that's a terrifying number to face. In past seasons, we've shared heartbreaking stories of families who lost their children to drugs, not to fearmonger, but to remind us that behind every statistic are real lives forever changed. But this season, we also want to shine a light on the hopeful side. For the first time in years, overdose deaths are trending downward, proof that prevention and intervention work. And research from the National Institute on Drug Abuse shows that kids who start prevention conversations early are up to 50% less likely to experiment with substances. And that's what today's episode is all about: spotting early warning signs, knowing the first steps to take if you're worried, and building supportive conversations before things spiral. Because prevention doesn't have to be about fear. It can be about connection, compassion, and hope. I'm Jodie Sweetin, and this is Awkward Conversations, where each week we arm parents with the tools to raise happy, healthy kids who are empowered to make smart choices about substances. New season, new stories, same honest conversations. Welcome to Awkward Conversations. And welcome to Amy McCarthy, my lovely co-host, who is Senior Clinical Social Worker at Boston Children's Hospital in the Division of Addiction Medicine.
Let's start by welcoming Kim McWilliams, Clinical Director at notMYkid.org. Kim brings years of experience as a therapist and prevention leader, working directly with families to tackle challenges like mental health, peer pressure, and substance use. She's passionate about giving parents practical everyday strategies to support their kids. Welcome to the show, Kim.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Happy to have you. And joining her is Sarah Grado, the Executive Director at notMYkid.org. With over 15 years of experience in prevention, Sarah has shared her own recovery story with students and parents around the world, inspiring others through her honesty and strength. Now a mom of 5, including 2 teenagers, she connects with parents on a deeply personal level and leads notMYkid's mission to empower youth and families with the tools to thrive. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us. And also, we are joined by Jamila Robinson, Senior Prevention Program Manager at the DEA. Jamila's work focuses on connecting families, schools, and communities with effective prevention strategies to keep kids safe and substance-free. And we're so grateful for the DEA's support of this show, along with the ELK's Drug Awareness Program, whose partnership makes these conversations possible. Jamila, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Happy to be here.
We've been talking about substance use, substance prevention, but what are some of the earliest signs that a teen might be experimenting with or exposed to substances or substance use?
So with our kids, one of the things that we might notice right from the beginning are those avoidance behaviors. So the kids might be not making eye contact with us when we're talking to them. They might be kind of isolating themselves in their rooms more than we would usually see. And really, we would start to see some disengagement. We might even notice that they're sleeping a lot more than usual. It's really hard right in the beginning because, teenagers in themselves, they have a lot of these behaviors. But as a parent, in your gut, if something's a little bit off, pay attention to those early signs and really, show concern when your kid is starting to kind of stray from that typical behavior. That's really what we want to keep our eyes on.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time. You know your kid best. So the changes in behavior, are really up for parents to see. Sarah, what are some of the things that you've noticed?
Some of the things that we talk to parents about is missing and dismissing some of those signs. I know we might miss some things, and I don't want parents to beat themselves up over that because we are human too. But I think it is important to watch for some of the things that Kim mentioned: the sleeping, the eating, the change in friend groups, if they're having a change in their grades, just a change in mood in general, and their just general interest. And it's important to not always approach it as it must be substances, because it might not be substances, but it's important to talk to the kid about what you're noticing. Say, hey, I noticed you haven't been eating that much, and I noticed maybe you've been sleeping a lot. Like, what's going on? Is everything okay? And what that does is it shows your teen that you care and that you're watching, and not in like a micromanaging way, but you deserve my attention, and I'm paying attention because I care.
Right. And saying to your kid, hey, I know you so well that I know when you're not yourself, and and that connection. I've said that to my kids sometimes too. They'll walk in the room and I look at them and I'm like, what's wrong?
Yeah.
You okay?
Yeah. And I think the dismissing part, we see all the time, the not my kid mentality.
Right.
Because it's hard for parents to to consider that maybe my kid could be using substances. And so we really want to challenge that and explore the conversation and just be open to it could be substances.
Right.
And it sounds like it's worthy, of course, of a conversation either way. When you see that change in behavior, it reinforces the connectedness we speak so often about in this show as a prevention, a tool for families. Yeah, I mean, it's so important to start those conversations and know that whether it's substances or not, there may be something to take a look at.
We're talking a lot about maybe suspicions or noticing changes in our young people, but what happens when we do find something suspicious? Parents panic a lot of the time. And I would love to hear from Jamila, what should their first steps be if parents find something substance use related, either in their kid's room or backpack or on their person? How do we deal with this and not panic?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Definitely being open with your communication, sharing what the consequence of that choice may be, whether it's their substances or whether it's a friend's substances, talking about the cost and consequences of substance use. And having an open, caring, and loving conversation instead of a retaliatory, punitive, emotional conversation with the kid, and making sure that conversation is at a level where they can understand and comprehend. We're starting to see drug use happening in the elementary school, as middle school or high school, targeting that communication with your child based on where they are, but making sure you're open and honest and really laying out what those substances and what those choices may do to your body as well as your brain.
I would love to hear from a therapist's perspective also, as a parent. What are the ways we can sort of emotionally regulate ourselves before going and having, a potentially high emotion conversation with our teens?
So we really, as a parent, I have to say one of the best things I can tell anyone going through this that suspects that their child is using substances is take a breath. Take a deep breath. Take 10 deep breaths. Pause. And it is absolutely okay not to have to feel like you need to address it in that moment if you can't be calm. So, really ultimately take that deep breath, take a break, tell your child, look, I want to put things on pause just for a moment. Let's both go just take a few minutes, take a few breaths, calm down, and let's come back together because I really do want to hear what you have to say, and approach it very much so openly with empathy. When you show empathy to your kids, you're not saying that you agree with them. You're not saying you agree with their choices. You're showing them that you care about what they're going through and you're ready and you're willing to listen to what they have to say. So that's kind of the biggest key thing right in the beginning. When emotions are high, things might be a little heated. It's okay to take a breath, put things on pause, come back to it when you're ready.
I think early intervention, is so critical in so many things in life, but when it comes to substance use too, can you both kind of talk a little bit more about, how parents might be able to access resources around early intervention?
Yeah, there's a wonderful framework, SBIRT, and SBIRT stands for Screening, Brief Intervention, Referral to Treatment. And it's a framework that our schools use, that pediatricians' offices use. So parents can at any point take their kiddo to go get checked out, go to a pediatrician, talk to a school social worker, talk to a school counselor, and just say, hey, I'm concerned. I think that my child is using, what can I do? And they'll start that process.
Yeah, and SBIRT has been shown to, have a 128.8 increase in clients reporting no substance use within 30 days at a 6-month follow-up. So that's pretty staggering, in a good way. And, there are programs like notMYkid.org, programs like, I work in the Adolescent Substance Use and Addiction Program at Boston Children's. Your pediatrician or your child's school might be able to help direct you to programs like that. But I think that in our program, it's never too soon for us to have a conversation with the family. And sometimes, that conversation leads to let's get you some additional support. And sometimes that conversation is let's provide a little bit of information and education. And then you kind of go on your way as a family. And so seeking help doesn't have to mean you're signing up for years and years and years of therapy per se. But, there are professionals out here like ourselves who are happy to help guide families through this process.
And Sarah, I wanted to touch on something with you. I know that you are in recovery and you have shared your story. And, as someone who also is, I understand that. And, sharing some of your struggles and your humanity with your kids is important, but it's hard to, I mean, my kids are 15 and 17, and I've told them some things that I've done, some scary things, and they're like, oh my God, how do you walk that fine line of like, I'm not glamorizing this. I'm not telling you it's fine. Look, I survived, but I'm telling you I was young and stupid once too.
Yeah. And I think it really depends on the child and the age of the child of how much we share. And, sharing what's appropriate and wrapping it around teaching moments. We get asked all the time because we have an early intervention program that we run. It's a virtual program. It's amazing, and families can go through it. And we get asked all the time by parents, like, how do I talk to my kid? Like, if I used and, nothing bad happened to me, like, how do I talk about that? And it's like, there are ways to share that, I have used, whatever substance in the past. And even though maybe, it didn't become a problem for me, I know it becomes a problem for other people, and just try to lean into that teaching moment. But we definitely want to stay away from, I did it and nothing happened and I turned out fine, because that's a mixed message. But for me personally, I really I don't, obviously share everything, because that's not necessary. But I think the connection that can happen of, I've been there and I felt that way. It's less about the actual using and more about how I felt in that moment and why I was so desperate to numb the pain that I was going through, and what else I could have done is what's important.
Absolutely.
I think, some of the research shows that sharing that experience, if you've had some of the more difficult experiences with substance use, can be really, can help delay or prevent. And like you said, like not, sharing that without sharing that there could be consequences can also, lead towards more substance use. And we talk about all the time in the show, the landscape has changed so much around substance use too. And so what maybe your grandparents or your parents did, and the access to what type of substances were available, is so different now too. And so I think highlighting that for young people is really important. And these are resources that I think, we know that you can use to have these discussions with your child if you found out they're using substances, but also they are resources to help you prepare to have a conversation, hopefully before your child, has any interaction with substances. So maybe we can talk a little bit about, how do you start that conversation before there's a problem?
Yeah, I think, it really isn't too young to start talking to your kids when they're 7, 8, 9 years old, even. Bringing it up, age appropriate conversations of just, do you know what this is? Have you ever heard of this before? And letting them know that you're that safe person, that they can really come to you if they have any questions. You're not going to be mad at them. You want them to be able to have that conversation. And that builds, if you start that at a really young age when they're teenagers, then they know you're their safe person and the safe place that they can come to. Even if they're out at that age with friends, they'd be able to at any time, call you, and they know that you'll be there for them if they needed you. So it really does start that young.
And that's what's so great about, again, the DEA's resources, again, is that hearing that they're available as young as kind of elementary school and going all the way up through young adulthood, that there's a guide at each point in kind of development.
Yeah. One of the things that I did when my kids were like middle school age was I told them, I said, hey, let's come up with like either a word or a little emoji or something that, like, if you're somewhere and even if it's not anything bad's going on, you're just in a mood and you're like, I hate this, I don't want to be here. Do that. I'll pick you up and we'll talk about it later. No questions. No, we're not going to get into it. Just, I'm there. And we'll discuss it later. And that was really helpful. And my kids did use it a couple of times, and they've used calling, my good best friends and being like, hey, can you help me with this? And, that circle of care is just so important.
I am at that phase now. My youngest is 11, going to middle school, going to 6th grade, and starting next week. And having that conversation, building that trust, getting ahead of what he may be exposed to in middle school, just having those gentle conversations, talking about those different substances. What would you do if you, went into the bathroom and saw, XYZ? How would you handle that? Be open to coming home and sharing with mom what you saw, what you experienced, and have me help me walk you through how to deal with that and what those challenges are. So, and I did not do that with my 19-year-old going into middle school. She was definitely shocked. We all were shocked as to the types of things that's happening in middle school, what they are exposed to. But I've learned that being open and honest, creating trust, not getting upset right away of what we think they should be doing versus what they're doing. They're faced with so many things now that we did not have to deal with just 5 years ago, much less 10, 15, 20 years ago. They are faced with constant communication and comparison, especially with social media. So I think the biggest point I want to make is empathy can go a long way with putting their guard down, allowing you to be able to kind of have their conversation.
I think for better or for worse, older children are often the teacher that helps you prepare your younger children. You're
Right,
like, I didn't
yeah.
know to expect this in middle school with my first one. And then the second one, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
well, maybe this is something we should look out for. I think for parents who are wondering more about how to start this conversation, we did an episode on this a couple of seasons ago called The Talk. And so, certainly feel free to reference back to that for more tips and information. Jamila, you guys also have a whole brochure about this as well.
Yes, yep. So we have several fact sheets, several brochures. We have a drug abuse of prevention, kind of a pamphlet. And as I mentioned, One Pill Can Kill. So if you also go to dea.gov/1pill, that's where you'll learn all about our prevention information, our prevention material, and our One Pill Can Kill campaign. And we make sure that we distribute this information across our 23 field divisions as well as nationally.
Right.
Tips for talking to your kids, preschool, elementary, middle, and high school. We have talking points and tips on the back for parents, what to say and what not to say.
And again, a reminder, parents who start these conversations early, these prevention conversations, their children are 50% less likely to experiment with substances. And so, hopefully folks feel a little bit more armed and prepared to have these conversations because they really can make a difference.
Yeah. Welcome back to Awkward Conversations, and welcome to Season 5.
Saving lives means staying informed. Knowing the dangers of using fake prescription pills can help those you care about and keep our community safe. As a parent, educator, neighbor, or friend, we all play a role in building safe and healthy futures for ourselves and our loved ones. Do your part to take the first step today. Visit GetSmartAboutDrugs.com to access education, prevention, and treatment resources. Fake prescription pills laced with fentanyl are deadly. Be their protector. Be informed. Visit GetSmartAboutDrugs.com.
It's Season 5 of Awkward Conversations. Let's get into it. And now, let's say, kind of worst case scenario, maybe it's not a suspicion of use, but it is confirmed that our kid has been using substances, either, pills, marijuana, alcohol. What should parents do if they confirm that use, other than like tossing the entire room? And, but that would probably not be the wise thing to do. But how do parents deal with that? Because it's really scary once you confirm your worst fears.
So I know we really want to interject, right? We want to crack down. We want to think of those punishments that we can for our kids. But it's so important to take a moment and recognize, what's going to be the most effective, right? Sit down with your child and explain what the rules are, what you expect of them, what you expect in your household. And then whatever it is that you set, whatever the consequences are, you have to follow through on that. And that's so, so important. So really having that conversation with them. And if it's an older child, if it's a teenager, really, sitting down and saying, hey, like, what do you think the next step should be? Because this is not okay in our house. This is not something that, we've approved of. So let's sit down and let's talk about it. I think that is really important before we get to a point, because not everything needs to jump right to that intervention. We don't immediately have to think, okay, now I need to put my child in counseling. They need rehab services. It's not necessarily that. It's what kind of limits can we set, in the very, very beginning stages. But certainly if it's something that goes beyond that and we feel like this is not something that I'm equipped to handle, maybe it is a lot of use and it's affecting their school, it's affecting friends, it's affecting, those really important parts of their lives. We might have to, at that point, get that assistance, get that counseling, get that guidance so that we can help direct them back on the right path.
Yeah. And again, I think if you're not sure where that falls, that'd be totally fair because, again, these are really complicated things. We're talking on these episodes a lot about one pill can kill and like how, urgent it can feel about like, intervening and, substances are laced with other substances and things like that. So if you're kind of listening to this and you're thinking about or you're in the position of, discovering substances that your child's using, again, like, talking to your child's school, talking to their pediatrician, taking that breath, but also feeling free to use the resources at your disposal to help you make the decision about where do we go from here. I feel like, again, that line between discipline and like teaching, I think about like the word discipline itself means to teach. And so what are ways that families can ride that line of teaching while providing kind of constructive and, clear boundaries and barriers for their kids?
Setting expectations, I think, at an early age is really helpful. It's never too early to set the expectation of what you want from them behaviorally. And as they get older, you're obviously going to be able to get more of their input. And I like using the acronym WAIT with parents. It stands for why am I talking? Or am I just waiting for my opportunity to interject? Or am I really truly listening to what my child has to say and I'm considering it? As we decide what those rules and boundaries are going to be, especially when they get to that age where they want to go out, they want to go to parties, you want to make sure that you have all of those kind of expectations set ahead of time. But most importantly, really making sure your child understands that no matter what, you are that safe person. They can call you at any time, no questions asked. You'll be there for them. You're going to come get them. And then you will deal with whatever it is that happened after that point, but you are their safe person.
I feel like so many adults, mostly myself, could benefit from the WAIT acronym.
I was like, hold on, why am I talking?
Not just with children and our children, but like at large, in general.
One thing I wanted to touch on too is I know that, trust can really be damaged between parents and kids and teens when there is substance use. How do you rebuild that? How do you start over again and feel safe that your child has maybe gotten in trouble and you've kind of course corrected and, you want to let them back out in the world. You have to let them back out in the world. How do you rebuild that trust, in that parent-child relationship?
So I think one of the big key steps is really, letting them know ahead of time, this is what I expect of you. So this is what we can do. I would expect you to do X, Y, and Z. And as they start to do that, you're going to, of course, start giving them more and more freedom again. So parenting, unfortunately, it's not this linear line. We're going to go back and forth in behaviors and rules and expectations, but making sure that they understand, punishment it's not this forever thing. It's not forever. So we certainly don't want to tell our child because they're in trouble, like, that's it. You're never leaving the house again. We want to make sure that we really get back into, okay, this is what you need to show me. And it's okay to ask your child too, like, what can I do? What's going to make you feel comfortable to come to me, to talk to me? What can I do differently?
Yeah. In our program, we often talk about creating almost like a behavioral contract, and not necessarily that it has to be a contract, but plan. And, basically, again, setting those expectations, making them very clear. And like you said, I think with teenagers, developmentally, especially, making those kind of consequences not so long-term that they're, it's just not worth, doing at all. So like what's important to them, what's kind of motivating to them, those things being part of the conversation. And I love what you said about also including them in the process. I think often we talk with families about, I'd like to hear what you think, like maybe would be like a fair kind of consequence, or I'd like to hear how, you think that we should manage this. It doesn't mean that I am going to be able to do what you think.
Right.
But I'd like to hear what your thought process is. And if we can, then I'd like to include your voice in this as much as possible, and finding those opportunities for young people to feel a sense of control, even in a disciplinary or punishment situation, because again, it's about teaching them. So, engaging them in that conversation further.
Yep. Sarah, I wanted to ask you, as someone who also struggled with substance use starting in high school and on through college in my early 20s, what would be the thing that you wish that you would have heard from a parent or caregiver when you were in that moment?
that's such a hard question, right? It's like, what would have helped me? And I look back and I can definitely think of many moments that were maybe missed that somebody could have intervened. And unfortunately, back then, I just think that we didn't talk about these things like we do today, thankfully. I think just validating that there wasn't something wrong with me, because that's what I felt, that I wasn't broken, that there was a way for me to feel better in a different way. And not coming from like that shame judgment stance, because I do feel like that happens a lot when we find out, like, why would you do that?
Right.
Like, and
I know my mom took it very personally, like I was doing it at her. And I know as a parent, now that I have teenagers, that's been something I've had to really keep in mind, is like, this isn't at me. They are just flailing their way through sort of learning.
Yeah, and that was definitely, I think, a part of like my journey as well. And I think that's a great point. I think it would have really helped if somebody just saw that I was hurting and that it wasn't about them. It was about me, and addressing my pain, not my use. I think that would have been huge.
Yeah.
And I think, to jump off of that, we know that, risk taking and substance use can be very normal parts of adolescent development. And, so it's holding as a parent, like, this is something that young people do because their brain is trying to figure out, like, how to move through the world and decision making and all of these things. And so responding from a place of like, this isn't totally unexpected. And also I need to help get you kind of on a different, kind of track or course, because it's also not healthy for your development at the same time. But it's such a double-edged sword.
Going back to your question, what would have helped me was somebody really sticking by and making sure that I was held accountable. Because I think I had no supervision and, not a lot of monitoring. And I was able just to continue in my use, and it just got worse. And I think if somebody would have intervened and said, because at that point in my life, my brain was still developing. I was struggling with mental health and addiction problems at the same time. I didn't have the ability to step outside of my situation to be like, there's something not right here. So I really needed an adult to come in and say, what you're doing is dangerous, and I care about you, and I want to make sure that this doesn't continue, and really like put boundaries. And I probably would have been mad. Like, I probably
Of
would
course,
have
if you're doing your job right as a parent with
teens.
teens, usually they're pissed at you.
And I think like that's okay. And so me as a parent today, like, I'm okay if my kids are mad at me, because it's my job to protect them and take care of them. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that we see with parents. They have such a hard time with sticking to those boundaries, because they it hurts when your kids are mad at you.
Right.
But in the end, like that is really what also helps is coming in and putting those hard boundaries down and telling them, like, I care about you, and I know that this is what's best for you.
Right. And not using shame as a weapon, because, the shame and guilt. Shame is I am bad. Guilt is I did something bad. And guilt is repairable. Shame sort of infects who you think you are of yourself. So really great points.
We've said before on the show, like, limits are love. And so I just want to reiterate that for families and remind them that, like, the boundaries are healthy that you're setting for your children, even if it's really painful. One of the things we know, from research from SAMHSA, is that parental disapproval of substance use is a huge kind of predictor and factor in young people not using substances at all. And so being able to share that, like you said before, Kim, like, my expectation is that you don't, engage in substance use in itself can be a huge kind of protective factor for young people. What are other protective factors that you all have seen or about that, help families in this situation?
I think really we have to model the behavior that we expect from our kids and the values that we want to instill in our kids. So being able to effectively cope with stress is so important. I think that that's probably the number one thing I would say to parents is, how do you model stressful situations? What coping skills do you have, and what are you teaching your child? And then that way, that could help prevent some of these later issues down the road, when our kids saying, well, I was stressed out, or this happened or that happened, and this is why I did it. So I think that's really important.
That reminds me a little bit too of, I come from a family where substance use, was a factor, for so many people in my family, including my dad. And I know that him sharing with me about his experiences and my, other family members and how substance use impacted their kind of development and their ability to reach their goals played such a role in my choices around substance use. I'm wondering, Sarah, what your thoughts are, in terms of, sharing that experience, and in what ways, can you do that in a healthy and supportive way?
And the data around parental disapproval being one of the strongest protective factors and one of the biggest reasons why kids don't use, that is whether the parent has used or not. If they disagree, it is still a strong protective factor. And so I think that is a thing for parents that have used. And, if they identify as being in recovery or not, being able to share that experience with their kid, it can give the kid more of a bigger picture of insight and create a connection between the parent and the kid to give them another reason not to use in the future. So that is something that we see, in our work, where kids are saying, I'm never going to do this because I know that my mom struggled with it and she talks to me about it, and they respect, the parent modeling now the recovery piece of it. And so that could be a really strong thing. And I think another amazing protective factor that a lot of kids are missing these days is a connection to a community. And community doesn't mean like a rec center necessarily, just a connection to a group of people where they feel like they belong and they have space. And that could be literally anything. It could be a sports team, which is more traditional. It could be a D&D group. It could just be any place outside of school and home where they have a connection to other people and they feel like they belong. And that's something that a lot of kids don't have right now, and that we're really trying to build in the communities that we work in.
I also think that for parents or caregivers who have a history of substance use, we know that can be a risk factor. Genetics can play a role in some of this, but some of these other protective factors that we're all talking about are things that I think for parents who have that history to be intentional about building in for their child is, such a way to help kind of prevent or kind of switch tracks like for their child in so many ways. And building community and being able to talk about these things, are two of those really big ways.
As somebody in recovery, as I'm sure you are too, the biggest thing that you find there is community. And what you find, in recovery and in, often 12-step programs or other programs of recovery is you find that really what you were searching for was just belonging.
Substance use thrives in isolation. And so again, knowing that you're not alone in this, that, that these experiences and that there are other people, like you said, all of these things that everyone has mentioned are the reasons that if you can de-isolate yourself, which I don't think is a word, but if you can, take yourself out of that isolation and enter a community of feeling, a space of belonging, you can really, again, change the whole game.
Yeah.
There's community and there's service. And that's another thing that we find. The teens in our recovery program, when they're in our program, they really, really thrive in the service piece. And just giving them an avenue to help other people, it makes their recovery even stronger. And so I think that that's another important piece.
The purpose, the sense of purpose.
Yeah. When I watch my kids help other people, my younger daughter still does Girl Scouts, things like that, like they get so excited to feel like, oh my gosh, I came home and like I did this and I helped this person and this little kid really liked me, or whatever it might be. To see them light up like that in terms of service and community and connection is, you look at them and you go, okay, I think today you're gonna be okay.
Because we do at notMYkid a full continuum of care. We do prevention in schools. So we'll go into a school and we'll talk to kids about some educational materials, and naturally kids come up and say, I identify with this. I'm currently struggling. And so we move them through, and they can go through our early intervention program with their family. Sometimes there's a kid in a school who is just struggling, and the social worker identifies it and they refer them to our program. The family goes through our program together. All of our programs, it's family based. It's not.
It's a family issue.
Yes. Yeah. It's not just the kid. The parents are involved, and we have a lot of parent support in our programs. And so they go through our program, and sometimes our early intervention is good, and they got the tools tools and they're like, we got it from here. And we tell them, if you need us, we're here. You can always come back, because we know recovery is not always a straight line. And so there's always an open door. And sometimes in that early intervention group, or even in like a more kind of peerish group, we see that maybe there's some more going on here. And we gently recommend, maybe some counseling, some treatment, just based on what's going on. But we could actually move a kid through the whole continuum up to escalating to higher care, intensive out treatment. Or we also have partnerships with like other providers if it is to the point where it would be inpatient. And then we are on the outside once they're done with inpatient, because that transition is hard. And it's really important that you have things lined up afterwards. If it is to a point where a kid is inpatient somewhere, having things lined up afterwards. And that's something that we can do too. So we have peer programs where we have young adults living in recovery who kind of just are those positive role models, and they can relate, and they kind of teach those coping skills, and they can kind of navigate those first early days of recovery. And then we really focus on connecting that kid to their community, whatever is going to work in their life. So getting them connected to that and just building those strengths in the family, and then eventually letting the family go practice and go do and go try. And then we'll always be here if you need us in the future.
I think it's really important for families to remember that, you don't have to know how to do all of this perfectly. In fact, you don't know how to do all of this perfectly, and to rely on those resources and those amazing programs like that, all the way from early intervention to up to inpatient treatment program, and to, walk through all of those things without shame and with love and empathy and compassion and listening. Wait, why am I talking? No. But all of those things, I mean, it's so key. And I know it's exactly what I would have wanted to hear as a young person. That I wasn't doing this to anyone, that I was just really struggling on my own. And so I think it's so important that, families go through programs like that together, because it isn't just the identified patient or the person struggling with abuse. It is the entire family. It's a family dynamic. There's pieces at play with everyone. So it's really important for people to remember that. Don't take the guilt on or the blame. It's not you. This is life, and we got to work through it. And I love programs like yours that really include that whole family piece and make sure that we're walking this road and trudging the road of happy destiny together.
If you could leave parents with one message about prevention, what do you think that might be? And maybe we'll start with you, Kim.
I think really parents need to understand the best intervention is prevention. Talking to your kids early, being that safe person for them that they can go to early, opening that communication early. I'm a therapist, and I'm saying prevent this from happening.
Put me out of a job.
Please,
That's the goal.
please. I want to get to the point where parents understand, we want to prevent, we want to do everything we can so that we don't get to treatment, because that's so hard. But also letting parents know that, substance use does not cause mental illness. Substance use and mental illness can go hand in hand, and it's okay to get support. There are resources out there. There's people out there, just like all of us sitting at this table, that we care and we can help.
Yeah, and I think so often, coming back to the fact that substance use in itself is not a moral failing, you can do everything quote unquote right and still have a child or a young person who's using substances or who is struggling with their substance use. And, that's why all of these services and supports exist, because, it affects everyone and it impacts everyone, and no one is kind of immune from sometimes this developing.
Yeah, it's a community issue.
Absolutely. Any last thoughts on what you would like to leave parents with?
My biggest thing is you're not alone.
Yes.
I know I know we all struggle with that feeling, but I say that all the time. You're not alone. And then, as important as prevention is, early intervention is just as important. So please don't dismiss and miss Not My Kid. Let's not have that mentality. Let's intervene early and catch it early, because it's so much easier to treat if we can catch it early.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been such a great conversation. If you want to give us where people can find you, where they can find your organization, and resources that you want to recommend, and we will make sure that all those resources are in the show notes so that you as parents and caregivers can find them when you're looking for them.
So the best place for people to find us is our website, notMYkid.org. We have everything on there, even a way to contact us. We're also on all the social media channels, Not My Kid.
Jamila, can you talk to us a little bit more about what's happening at the DA and the prevention resources that families can use to kind of frame having this conversation with their kids?
Yes, here at DEA in our community outreach and support section, we offer a variety of resources for targeted at elementary, middle, high school, and even the college level. A lot of our resources around conversation starters. We have the One Pill Can Kill resource. We also talk about and distribute our fact sheets, what every parent needs to know about fake pills. Here we have these, and we distribute these at our conferences. We send these out to our community coalitions, our prevention providers, our parent groups. We have 23 field divisions across DEA where we have a community outreach specialist in every field division. And so we're making sure that we're disseminating this information at the local level as well. We have Operation Prevention. That's a free and no-cost evidence-based, science-informed curriculum where we take this information and try to push as much material into our school settings because we know our schools are very important in sharing this prevention information to across the curriculum, across our elementary, middle, and high school. Another resource that we have are our websites, and those are operationprevention.com. Get Smart About Drugs, which is really targeted towards parents. It has a parent toolkit, conversation starters, different suggestions on how to engage with your children based on their school age. Just Think Twice is aimed at students. So this is a website where we submit all of our information targeted for young people. They have a website designated just for them and all of the materials that they need. And then lastly, our Campus Drug Prevention, which is targeted to our college population, but it's actually has an aim of focusing on the peer counselors on campus and the mental health counselors and the substance use counselors. It's a toolkit to help them on how to engage and reduce substance use on the college campuses.
Great. There's so many resources, and all of those resources that Jamila just mentioned will be in our show notes, so make sure and check those out. Jamila, any last thoughts from you on what you'd like to leave us with?
Yes, great. Thank you for the opportunity. Just to close, again, DEA is an enforcement agency, but we have an outreach and community prevention outreach arm. And so we really want to make sure that we're raising awareness. We are powering and shifting our law enforcement lens to a prevention and public health lens. We really want to empower our parents, raise awareness for our elementary, middle, high school youth population. That is something we're also doing with our field divisions, is helping our community outreach specialists raise awareness across their communities.
Great. And all those links will be in our show notes so parents and listeners and caregivers can access them and use them as they need. Well, thank you so much, Kim, Sarah, Jamila, for joining us. This has been a really important conversation. Again, like you said, early intervention, prevention, all of that is so important. And to remember that you are not alone, which is the whole reason that we do this show, and having those awkward conversations and knowing that you're not alone in having them. So if you want to go find any of the resources that we have discussed, go to our show notes and they will all be there for you. And in the meantime, we will be back next week. So keep those awkward conversations coming. Well, that's all for now. Tune in next week for more of Awkward Conversations Season 4. Use the Force, Luke. With great power comes great responsibility. Just keep swimming. These iconic lines from some of our favorite movies do more than just entertain. They teach valuable life lessons and help navigate challenges by distilling complex concepts into something easily understandable.
I think it's really important to do art together, to have it just be a way to pass time, and not have it be have a lot of learning objectives necessarily. But I think the more that kids get into art and making things, they want to know how to make it better. And that's the best motivator.
Any form of artistic expression leads to an overall increase of measurable brain development and a decrease in suffering for kids.
And certainly exposure to arts, being able to go to museums, galleries, plays, dances, everything, and then just asking them about their response to it, I think is much more powerful than trying to teach them too much. When they ask, that's a good teachable moment. But I like to ask them, like, what do you think of that? What was their favorite part? What was weird to you? Why do you think it was weird? And those are the questions I think that get kids, again, really thinking.
Make sure to check out getsmartaboutdrugs.com. Parents, caregivers, you can find so many resources of great information there about how to talk to your kids and make these conversations a little less awkward. A huge thank you to the Elks DAP, which is the largest all-volunteer nationwide drug awareness program, and also a huge thanks to the DEA for their outreach program and for making this possible.
The views, information, or opinions expressed during the Awkward Conversation series are solely those of the individuals, speakers, commentators, experts, and/or hosts involved, and do not necessarily reflect nor represent those of the production, associates, or broadcaster, or any of its employees. Production is not responsible and does not verify for accuracy any of the information contained in the series available for viewing. The primary purpose of this series is to educate and inform. This series does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. This series is available for private, non-commercial use only. The production, broadcaster, or its channel cannot be held accountable for all or any views expressed during this program.